Hey doing everybody, welcome back. What we're going to talk about today here is this whole denial of due process of law. Yes, we're talking about that again. You know, they like to say, well, due process doesn't apply to non-citizens. Really? If it doesn't apply to non-citizens, how do we know they're non-citizens? Well, it doesn't apply to those here illegally. Okay, without due process, how do we know? Without due process, how do we know they're here illegally? What, just because they have a name like Hernandez or Hidalgo? Nah, that doesn't fly, right? Now, I'm not focused in on Kilmar Abrego Garcia specifically, right? But he is a prime example. He is a prime example. You know, he's still the major one that's in the news. But forget about him specifically. Let's look at the big picture, right? We have an administration that, by the way, here's George again, right? And we have an administration that is throwing people out of the country without due process of law, accusing them of gang members and being gang members and being violent criminals with no evidence to support it. They don't want to see any evidence. They don't care. All they know is they said it, and that's all that matters to them, right? So, for those of you who think it's a good idea to deny people due process, oh, and by the way, the administration has also said that we can get rid of the homegrowns. Okay, you all know that I'm from Iowa, right? I was born and raised in Iowa. That makes me a homegrown, right? Wouldn't it? And if you were born in, I don't know, Schenectady, New York, or Butte, Montana, or trying to get him out of the way there so he doesn't step on my keyboard here. Butte, Montana, or Moab, Utah, or Norman, Oklahoma, or Clarksville, Tennessee, or you name it, right? Anywhere. Biloxi, Mississippi, wherever you're from, right? You're a homegrown. So, right? If we can throw homegrowns out of the country, right, and lock them up in some foreign prison, there are people who are actually supporting this because, well, we're only going after these people, right? You know, if you're only going after these people, right, well, do you understand what happened, right? Do you understand what just happened by kicking that door wide open? Let's assume that the next president will be an authoritarian Democrat, right? So imagine Trump, but on the left, right? Let's just pretend that's going to be our next president. All right. Will that happen? I seriously doubt it, but you never know. It could. There are leftist authoritarians out there. So let's just say, for an example, that I'm talking somebody to the left of Bernie Sanders, right? But with Trump's authoritarian tendencies. That person becomes president of the United States. Now all of a sudden they don't like X, Y, and Z people, right? And you happen to fall into that group. Guess who can get thrown out? Guess who can get locked up without due process? You. Yep. You're a target. Whether under this administration or in a left-wing authoritarian regime, I don't like calling this an administration. It's a regime. It's a fascist regime. But under a right-wing regime, under a left-wing regime, right? Political opponents can be prosecuted and thrown out of the country, right? Homegrown or not. Do you really want that? Do you want American citizens to have to fear for their lives because a president of the United States can single-handedly determine that they don't deserve due process of law and that the Fifth Amendment no longer applies? I don't think I want that, right? Because I would probably be an enemy of both the right and the left. I'm definitely an enemy of the right at this point, despite having been a Republican and a fairly conservative one at that, right? Except combination of two things happened. Combination of two things caused me to get to where I am now. The Republicans shifted so far to the right that it's now a fascist party, and I personally have shifted somewhat to the left, so that my views are more in line with kind of the centrist Democrats, maybe the center-left Democrats, right? So I'm left on some issues, I'm still conservative on others, but yeah, I have shifted a little bit to the left. In a previous video about the universities, it's because I've learned things. And when you learn things, you change your opinions. And if facts don't change your opinions, well, that means one of two things. Either facts are on your side, or you didn't really learn anything. Or, actually, it could mean a third thing. You're just stubborn and want to hold on to your beliefs despite knowing what the facts are, that the facts don't support you. But yeah, the door's been kicked wide open for a leftist authoritarian. Why am I struggling with that word today? Authoritarian, not authorian. What am I thinking? Anyway, right? The door is wide open for a leftist authoritarian to become president of the United States and just get rid of all the right-wingers. Because we have a right-wing authoritarian who wants to get rid of all the left-wingers. And without due process, who's to stop anyone from doing that anyway? Right? If it can happen to one, it can happen to all. If it can happen to one, it can happen to anyone. If it can happen to anyone, it can happen to everyone, I think is how I heard somebody say it on one of the news outlets that I listen to. I think that's how it was said, something to that effect anyway. But yeah. Stand your ground, stand for the Fifth Amendment in its entirety, stand for the Constitution in its entirety. As it is, we have Donald Trump and his administration out there violating the 4th, 5th, 6th, and 8th Amendments. At a minimum. At a minimum. And that's only as it pertains to this. They're also violating the First Amendment in certain ways. They don't understand the Ninth Amendment, so they don't even know what that means. The 10th Amendment, that's going to go soon enough. The Third Amendment, nobody really understands that one either, or why that's still important, so that's going to get ignored. And eventually they'll get around to the second and the second and the seventh as well. Actually, the seventh is coming up pretty soon too, but right now it's 4, 5, 6, and 8, among other parts of the Constitution. Anyway, stand firm, demand due process, stand up for those for whom it is being denied. I'll catch you next time.